Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the press briefing for the Office of the Prime Minister. I see that all of our members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, are in place. As you are all aware, first let me introduce myself. My name is Tiska Pradham-Brister, and I am the Public and Media Relations Specialist here in the Communications Unit. As you're aware, Clint Watson, who is our press secretary, is traveling with the Prime Minister. He's at COP26, so in his stead, we have the Director of Communications, Mr. Latreille Ramming, who will be hosting today's press briefing. So we'd like to welcome Mr. Ramming up to the podium, please. And of course, in keeping with COVID protocols, we're going to make sure that we wipe down our mics.
Morning, members of the press. I would also like to welcome the Minister of National Security, Mr. Wayne Monroe, who will also be joining us today. Governing in 2021 requires addressing not only the problems that arise within our borders, but the problems that begin elsewhere but wash up on our shores. COVID-19 has had a serious health and economic repercussions on our country, and climate change, driven by carbon emissions, is nothing less than an existential threat to island nations like ours. Addressing these threats requires taking action at home and being an effective advocate of our country's interests abroad. In our blueprint, we emphasize the need to properly manage the pandemic. We are partnering with experts and frontline workers to prioritize public health while restoring the important civil liberties and supporting economic growth. Some public health measures continue to be necessary, of course. The pandemic is far from over, unfortunately. But protocols and restrictions will result from consultation and be supported by science. When we moved the curfew to midnight, there were warnings that the cases would increase. That has not happened. At the start of the pandemic, we supported the emergency orders to give the prior government the time to adjust to the new threat represented by the virus. But it became very apparent that the emergency orders were being used to shield pandemic spending and shield government decision makers from accountability. That's obviously wrong. We told the Bahamian people that we would operate differently. Therefore, on the 13th of this month, in little more than a week away, the emergency orders will fall away, and the competent authority will be dismantled. Instead, Section 29 of the Health Service Act will be used to authorize health measures. The government maintains the flexibility to make adjustments to public health measures as the need arises. But operating this way will result in broader consultation and more transparency. The Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Michael Davel, will continue to partner with doctors and nurses and experts and with the Bahamian people, whose compliance with these health measures is essential for our nation's public health. As you know, there have been substantial improvement in our country's COVID-19 situation over the past few weeks. The average daily cases has dropped, and the positivity rate is trending downward. Nonetheless, we emphasize the Delta variant is highly transmissible and remains a potent threat. Both the Prime Minister and Minister Davel has emphasized the importance of taking a multi-layered approach to addressing the ongoing threat. No one intervention is sufficient by itself. Vaccines are key, of course. Billions of vaccines have been administered worldwide, and they have proved to be safe and effective at reducing the risk of severe infection and hospitalization. So far, over 60% of Bahamians have received at least one jab of the COVID-19 vaccine. We are very pleased to have procured enough vaccines to provide second jabs, which means in the coming weeks, a substantial percentage of our population will be fully vaccinated. Public interest in vaccine has been increasing, and we are in the process of creating a public information plan to answer the question about the vaccines. We will continue to procure enough vaccines to meet our demand. Vaccinations are essential, but only one part of a larger plan. We continue to expand free testing, including more on our family islands. Free testing has always been another cornerstone of the PLP's COVID-19 action plan. Testing gives the Bahamians the information they need to protect themselves and the people they interact with, and it gives the health professionals the information they need to contain the outbreaks. As you know, we have been distributing high quality medical grade masks and will continue to expand this effort. There's a lot of data to support that the continued rise of usage of masks, just as it's clear of limiting the size of gathering, remains essential to reducing outbreaks. There is no such clarity regarding nightly curfews, though, therefore, after November 13, the curfew will end. Given the facts before us, there is no justification to infringe on the rights of the Bahamian people, especially the negative impact the curfew had on our economy. Let us turn to climate change. In September, the Prime Minister addressed the United States General Assembly and made it clear that the Bahamas intend to lead in advocating on the global stage for small island states like ours. This week, the Prime Minister traveled to COP26 in Scotland, a global meeting of world leaders, where he and our delegation were well received. As we all know too well, hurricanes are increasing in intensity and frequency, and it is the carbon emissions from large countries driving these changes. The Prime Minister told countries and fellow leaders that they need to succeed in a way that their predecessors has not, making a strong case for courage and urgent action. The Prime Minister intends to lead the Bahamas. The Prime Minister intends for the Bahamas to lead by example. As you know, renewable energy and the green and blue economies are key priorities of our blueprint for change. Some members of the Bahamian delegation remain in Glasgow to attend a series of technical meetings that will support these priorities. The Prime Minister will update the country on these developments tomorrow when he returns to our country. Let me also say that when the Prime Minister appointed Mr. Wayne Munro, he did so knowing that Mr. Munro was a human rights lawyer. Mr. Munro understood the mandate the Prime Minister was giving him to restore the trust and confidence in the Royal Bahamas Police Force and other key law enforcement agencies. It's with that, I invite the Minister of National Security to bring further comments.
I'm supposed to clean this before I take off my mask. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramming. I wasn't alerted that I was supposed to bring remarks, but I was alerted that the press had some questions. What I would say is this, as a precursor to it. Since taking office, I think it was 6 weeks ago, I had occasion to meet with a number of the entities under the Ministry of National Security. The only one I have not had an opportunity to meet with yet is the Police Inspectorate, appointed under the Police Forces Act. I've received a report from them. Since I've taken office, there have been a number of events that were press-worthy. There's been the assault on the southern border by irregular migrants that have been met. You would have seen recently a disturbance at the detention center. That occasion migrants being held there, being brought before the court and sent to the Bahamas Department of Corrections, which is also an agency that I have oversight of. You would have seen an inmate at B-Docks having been found unresponsive in his cell. And you will have also seen a number of concerns with the public with regard to Royal Bahamas Police Force, namely a male being placed in a cell with a female and allegations of police brutality. I should make it very clear, I do not run the Royal Bahamas Police Force operationally. I do not run or command the Royal Bahamas Defense Force operationally, nor do I run the Bahamas Department of Corrections, although I'm responsible statutorily for the welfare of inmates. The Parliamentary Commissioner's Office is also within my ministry. the newsworthy thing there would have been the past general election and the upcoming local elections. The minister responsible for local government wishes to have those early in the new year, and the commissioner's office will be tasked to accommodate them. I can say that coming to office, with regard to Royal Bahamas Defence Force, I found an agency that had its mission multiplied, but its manpower and resources weren't properly addressed. The Prime Minister, in writing to me, has tasked me to increase their institutional capacity, which to me will mean increasing their manpower and their resources. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, I met with a number of projects in train. The one of note that was a disappointment was that there was a tracking device for persons in quarantine that the Bahamas government is paying $7,000 a month for, but was not used at all for the whole life of the contract, which expires March of next year. And so during this COVID emergency, the Bahamian people have so far paid about $70,000 for technology to track persons who ought to be in quarantine without it being deployed at all. I've met the Royal Bahamas Police Force with a number of technology updates, which we intend to continue. And if I see there are questions surrounding the recent shooting, which addresses CCTV. I will tell you that generally, my disposition is that CCTV coverage of New Providence is not wide enough, that we need to improve and expand the coverage of CCTV in New Providence. I am told by the Member of Parliament for Centerville, where the shooting took place, that persons are refusing to make available to the police their private CCTV material, and that only brings home that public CCTV is necessary, particularly in spots where they would be useful in identifying perpetrators of crime. So true to the mandate, I will be approaching the Bahamas government to expand these resources of the Royal Bahamas Police Force so that they may properly do their jobs. With regard to Bahamas Department of Corrections, there seems to have been some controversy over the commissioner being sent on administrative leave by the permanent secretary. But clearly, one reads the Correctional Services Act, and one will find that the correctional institution must be run in a particular way. Particularly, it must have a deputy director, it must have an assistant director. There is a correctional service board that carries out statutory functions for review and protection of inmates. I met with that board who indicated that they were unable to report to me as statutorily required because they received no cooperation from the current substantive Commissioner of Corrections. That is an important body, and its function will be even more important when one looks at the investigation into the inmate who was found unresponsive and pronounced dead. We also met the correctional institution in a state where it was not being disinfected, sanitized daily, although the doctor was of the view it should be, and there was no coherent COVID mitigation strategy. Such was the strategy that you had quarantine in a cell 6 foot by 9 foot into which 4 persons were placed without any of them having been tested, even with a rapid antigen test. Since the 2 deputy commissioners have been returned to the correctional institution, the doctor, at my direction when I visited and in concert with the acting commissioner, has produced a COVID mitigation plan that is at the rate of costing of about $19,000 a month, which, because it wasn't engaged by the previous commissioner, is unbudgeted. and the government will be asked to provide for that. It will be an unmitigated disaster if we were to have a COVID outbreak in a correctional institution where men are confined together and women in small, closed spaces. The correctional institution, further, the Correctional Service Board has contacted the acting commissioner, and I expect that they will be speaking shortly so that that board can do its job and function in reviewing the state of the prison and the state of inmate relations in the prison and any complaints from inmates. The Parliamentary Commissioner's Office has an acting commissioner who served during the last general election. As indicated in my contribution on the speech from the throne, we have invited the comments of persons who participated in the election, and we will consider those together with the comments from the international observers so that we can improve the product that is delivered by that office. That's a general report of the institutions under the remit of my ministry. The only other major matter of report is I came into a ministry that has only an acting permanent secretary, Cheryl Darville, who is very committed to what she's doing, but currently she does not have the support of an undersecretary. And I have found and made the determination, having seen a review, that the ministry's structures are not correctly populated to do the jobs that the ministry is tasked to do. So, for instance, for the police inspectorate to work, there must be administrative support of the police inspectorate. For the Correctional Service Board to operate, there must be support of that body. For there to be any meaningful oversight of the Royal Bahamas Defence Force and the Parliamentary Commissioner's Office, you will require administrative support for that, none of which, in my judgment, is sufficiently there. The Permanent Secretary, Project Office of Delgado Forbes, and DPS Lisa Hall have collaborated and produced a structural adjustment that we will seek to be approved shortly so that the ministry can efficiently do its job. The elephant in the room that everyone always asks me about, this drone program, we have paid out a lot of money. We haven't got very much product in exchange for that fast payment out, and we are currently investigating to get to the bottom of what has happened. That's what I would say in introductory remarks, and I would invite any questions.
Minister, you'd mentioned a contract to monitor quarantined individuals, which has not been in effect or working for the last 10 months. Can you be more specific about that and whether you're referring to Hubcat or any other contract engaged?
Hubcat was the beginning model with apps on your phone, but all one needs to know is that I have 3 cell phones, and I can let you put the app on any one of them. And when you call me, someone just needs to answer my phone. That was abandoned in exchange for what is in effect a tagging system where there would be a little tag, almost like what you see at the hotels, put on the individual. There would be a base set, and if the tag moved out of the base set, it would be an alarm, and the person would be geo-tagged to an area in which they were to quarantine. It seems to be a useful product. The Minister of Health, Dr. Darville, is keen in using it, and we expect shortly to at least roll out and use the 100 units that we pay $7,000 some a month for.
So it wasn't that it was ineffective, but just that it wasn't in use for that period of time the contract was signed.
That's correct. So the past administration was spending public funds for a product that was designed to track people and ensure that they stay in quarantine, and they chose not to use it for whatever reason.
So where were they?
Sorry?
Where were they? Were they in the Ministry of Health? Where were they?
Well, the contract is with the Ministry of National Security. As far as I'm aware, the products are in country. They were just never designated to say. I'll give you an example of myself, because I was hospitalized for COVID under the past administration. So when I was discharged, nobody told me anything. I just went home. Because I'm a responsible citizen, I kind of figured that I was supposed to stay in my house for 10 to 14 days. After that passed, I called them to say, shouldn't I be released soon? And I was told that they were trying to reach me, but they had the wrong number. And that was that. I could have been anywhere in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and they would not have had a clue. At that time, they had these devices that a little bit of foresight would have just said, Monroe is about to be discharged, because the doctors would tell you that. Go and snap one of them on him, find out where he lives, geotag him, and tell him, stay home for the next 10 days. So I don't know exactly what care was being taken in the last administration, but certainly it was paid from my ministry's budget, $7,000 odd a month for 100 tracking devices where we did not use a one.
So you're saying they're in country, but can you say exactly where they are? They're in your office right now?
Not the police administers it.
Do you have any update on the events that led to that assault in the prison cell?
Well, you describe it as an assault. I haven't seen any information to say that it was an assault. What I've received is a report from the prison medical officer to indicate being summoned to a cell where there was a male who was unresponsive, who he later pronounced dead. The coroner was summoned.
No, I mean of the woman who was sharing a cell.
Oh.
And you said an officer would be held accountable. Any update on that?
The woman who was put in the cell, the man who was put in the cell with the woman, I haven't received a report on that as yet. Certainly, the procedure would be that you do not house males and females together. You cannot, and I would say it quite clearly, and it's not in my judgment prejudging it, you cannot not ascertain who is in a cell. I'm aware from my practice that when you come into custody, they keep your detention records out front, so they have a listing of who is in custody and for what. And it would also say what is their gender. So in my judgment, that thing could not happen if persons were carrying out the policies in place by the Royal Bahamas Police Force. I know that when you're in custody, they're supposed to check on you regularly during the evening to ensure that you are okay. If you come into custody drunk, they're actually supposed to wake you up to make sure you have an aspirated vomit or something like that and have medical issues. I don't understand how it could happen. I say I'm looking for answers. It would amaze me if somebody could give me an answer that was satisfactory. So I would expect that the complaints process should be, the disciplinary process should be engaged at some point after all the reports are in.
So in the meantime, that officer remains on the job?
I cannot say that. The commissioner runs the police force. I don't interfere in his running of the police force. After I think a reasonable period has passed, I will inquire.
Just reminding you said someone would be held accountable for it, just reminding you.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Notwithstanding the fact that you haven't been briefed yet about the police inspectorate office, do you have any reason to believe that that office has ever functioned the way the law intends for it to function? And can you give us a sense of what we can expect from that office under your watch? And has this administration appointed anyone as yet to the police inspector?
The current office, the current life of the police inspectorate, and they're appointed by the Governor General, expires June 2022. The current chairman is Tanya McCartney, who's been in touch with me, but I've not met with them formally. They've sent a small report, which I would wish to discuss with them. But the inspectorate is supposed to have oversight of complaints and corruption. The inspectorate is supposed to be able to review the handling by complaints and corruption of citizens' complaints. The inspectorate has to have on it one person who is a lawyer of at least 10 years standing, or a retired policeman who retired at the rank of superintendent or above. I cannot say without having a briefing from them whether they have been carrying out the statutory mandate. I can say that the Commissioner of Police has advised that during the tenure of Ms. McCartney, she did make requests of complaints and corruption for information. She did, in fact, do that, and that's a part of the function. Once I would have met with them, I would know fully what their function has been over the past year. They did indicate that they want to move to a complaint system a lot like they have in Jamaica, in the COM, but having looked myself specifically at the police inspectorate, I'm not sure that that is in a body itself that is independent of the police. In fact, it's independent even of me as the minister. So the question will be, have they been sufficiently aggressive in their execution of their duties? Having looked at the makeup of it, and as I said earlier, I don't see in my ministry the proper administrative support for it to perhaps be acting properly. So let me tell you some of the issues that I see. You have part-time appointees to this board, this inspectorate. I see no dedicated administrative personnel of the sort who could grade, evaluate, and put together case files with summaries on them for the inspectorate. So that is a weakness in the ministry that we will have to address. If you have part-time people doing things, you have to understand their limitations. And so for every part-timer, like Bar Council, which I serve on previously, we're part-timers, but we have a full administrative staff to put together things for us. That is lacking for this inspectorate from what I could see. I do not understand why it hasn't been addressed thus far, but we intend to address it.
You mentioned some of the hindrances police have had in their investigations into some of the recent shootings, for example. With everyone now anticipating the end to emergency orders and what that may mean for curfews, I'm just wondering what police may be discussing as they prepare for a situation where, or following up on a situation where they may have arguably had what you may call somewhat of a break with all of the COVID restrictions that we've been under for the last year and a half.
Well, I had this break, but when we started a curfew, we had a home invasion right at the beginning of it at an hour that persons were supposed to be indoors and locked away. The murder stats show that the vast majority of murders take place in the daytime. So removing a curfew won't add a big burden insofar as that is concerned. The police 24 hours a day. The issues that arise with regard reluctance of, and we're not talking now about the police being slack in anything, we're talking about private citizens who say they have an issue with crime when they have a CCTV system that captures the crime, that records it, not being cooperative with the police. Now, you could have all the complaints you want about the police, but it is a cooperative venture. The public has to participate in this venture. If it doesn't fully engage, fully participate at all levels, then we're going to have a problem. And so I intend to meet with the police officer who serves on the technical team at the ministry to discuss with him what it will take to radically expand CCTV coverage in areas that the spot shotter records heavy volume of gunfire. And so and the system, when we throw out the real-time crime center, displayed where shots were happening, whether they were single shots, multiple shots. And so we have to use technology. We don't have a policeman on every corner. You can have a camera places that policemen are not. The people who choose to be criminals must understand that if that is your choice, we are going to deploy resources that will permit us to identify you so that you can be held to account.
And is there nothing that would allow you to intervene if you needed a piece of video that a private citizen had possession of? Is there nothing you can do to be able to access that without their permission?
You mean before they delete it?
I guess.
Okay. Yes, you can before they delete it.
And that's what you've been finding that people are doing?
Well, that's a complaint that was reported to me.
Minister, while we have you here, you noted some of the COVID-19 the COVID-19 situation at the prison. Is there any consideration at the cabinet level or from your ministry to release prisoners early to reduce the number of persons at the facility now?
Well, within my ministry is a prerogative of mercy committee. I have asked for a report of everyone who has applied for early release. I've received it. That is a matter I will discuss with the Prime Minister on his return to country to have a sensible strategy forward. I can tell you that, as foreshadowed in my contribution in the House, we intend to move on the Parole and Reentry Committee report. That report has a number of aspects. First, it says that everyone will now, once we adopt it, serve their full sentence. So currently, if you're sentenced to 10 years in prison, you do not do 120 months. You do 80 months because you get 4 months off a year for good behavior. If you get out and you reoffend, you never serve the balance of the 40 months. We intend to change that. You will serve your entire sentence. Some of it in prison, some of it released on parole, where you will be subject to supervision, that if you do mess up, you will return to prison to serve the balance of your sentence. That will assist somewhat because you will be able to grade persons and release them on parole. You will also have available to the courts a range of sentences that should really replace these very short sentences, the only purpose of which could be to ruin somebody's life. Because it's not enough time for you to be rehabilitated, to go through any sensible process of rehabilitation, but it's just long enough for you to lose your job, lose your home, lose family structures, and come out poorer without any attitude adjustment and have nothing to look forward to but life after a very short sentence. So once that is implemented, you should see more rehabilitative directed services. If you do something really silly, you will have your life subject to supervision. All of us who've come through the emergency orders, having been locked in our homes, know that you could be in prison without being in BDOCs, eh? When you can't come out your home even to get water from the pump, you are effectively in jail in your house. We have technology that we could use to ensure that you are in your house when we say you should be in your house.
Another question, in the previous minister noted that the report for what actually took place at the government house was ready, but however we weren't able to. Since coming in office, have you been able to see the report of actually what took place at government house with the murder?
I have seen the report. When I came to office, I discovered that it had not been provided to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. And in my first meeting with the Commodore, I discovered that and I directed that it should be provided to him. I will be interested in hearing the comments from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the Royal Bahamas Police Force on the content of that report. And then we can speak about it generally and publicly. I can tell you that it speaks about upgrades in CCTV coverage at Government House, and having been at Government House on National Heroes Day holiday, a lot of that is being built into the current renovation. It also spoke to increasing the barriers at Government House, but that will be something that will have to be determined in discussions with the Governor General's office. It's an historic house, and they may not wish to have the wall go up by 6 feet. They may not wish to have intrusive fencing, certainly on Shirley Street side, but that is a matter that after discussion with the Defense Force and the Police Force and the office at Government House, we can determine what steps are taken.
Mr. Munro, we still have people going to court complaining that police have used violence to coerce confessions out of them, and we still have cases lost on the basis of whether jurors accept confessions, and the Court of Appeal has still been overturning some cases. Do you have any view on the adequacy of CCTV and surveillance systems in police stations? I know one of the complaints of defense lawyers has been that there aren't enough surveillance in police stations and that they only get to see the videotaping of an interview, but perhaps not the interrogation that took place the day before and whatnot.
That there is no perfect system. So for instance, when we moved the videotaping of confessions, a big complaint was that you don't know what's happening behind the camera, right? So if somebody wishes to make an allegation, they can. But let's look at the technological advances that have happened and continue. The institution of the use of body cameras. Now you should be able to, in the ordinary course of things, see what happens from the time the police with the body camera starts to interact with members of the public. I've come out publicly to say that members of the public should record interactions with the police. Chief Superintendent Lockhart, when he was in charge of the police tribunal, made it clear that the police have no right to take your phone. I made it quite clear that members of the public who have CCTV systems should ensure that they have an off-site recording thing on their phones or somewhere where if you have a wayward officer who comes and takes your DVR, you have a backup of what happens. And I say that unapologetically because I'll give you an example. I met in the Ministry of National Security a policy that people couldn't bring their phones up when they met with me. I don't understand the need for that policy. I would only have a problem with you recording me if I was going to lie about what I said to you. And since I don't intend to lie about what I say to you, I don't care if you record me. In the same way, police officers who are doing their jobs properly should understand that having a real-time recording of it helps them. It assists them from unfounded allegations of violence. So to my mind, having coverage in police stations could only improve the lot of the police. Because if you are lying about me beating you, and when you lie about me beating you, I can produce the video recordings of your time in custody, your lies are going to be very ineffective. The joke that used to happen is that persons didn't know that their interviews were recorded because they weren't told. They gave allegations of violence, and when the police came to put in the recording, then they objected to it because they said they were recorded without their consent. Those applications never succeeded in court. But it should be abundantly clear that having a clear recording of what happens assists the process. So resources permitting, that would not be something that I would resist. But from where I stand, where we have crime in the streets, the priority will be getting coverage there first. We have finite resources. We have to determine how to use them, and that would be, in my judgment, the proper priority to place it in. Any further questions?
Any update on the promotions for police force? The Commissioner of Police hasn't said much about it, but we understand they were approved prior to the last general election.
What was approved?
The promotions for the
If the Police Service Commission had sent back the promotions, they would have been promulgated. I can say that, how do I put it diplomatically?
Take your time.
I received, and it would be a matter of public record discoverable under the Freedom of Information Act. I received a revised list whereon the Commissioner of Police indicated that some persons who would have been getting a second round of promotions, having just been promoted right before that, where some person hadn't been promoted for years, was inappropriate. And so he sent a revised list. I should be very clear about this. My mantra that I recite when I meet the agencies is I believe that if you recruit the best, promote the best, equip them, you will get good results. So the basis for political interference in any of those processes will interfere with that formula. I have asked Paul Jones, who is currently in the legal department of the ministry, to review for me the actual process of promotions and recruitment with a view to examine how you could make it more objective. I've asked Commander Floyd Moxey, who I seconded to my office from the Defense Force, to do the same thing with regard recruitment and promotions in the Defense Force. It is not a PLP or FNM police force or Defense Force, although the PLP created the Defense Force. It is the People's Police Force, it's the People's Defense Force, and persons who choose a career in those services, including BDOCs, should be satisfied that if they discharge their duties and they are able and capable, and how do they put it in the Defense Force, and eligible for promotion and worthy of it, that they should get it, and that process should not be interfered with.
So promotions coming soon?
Yes, many people are going to have a good Christmas.
How many is many?
Sorry?
How many is many?
Talk about police officers now.
Police officers will be across the ranks. From what I'm aware, the Defense Force will be across the ranks as well. I think the prison promotions have already come out for the upper staff officers and also for the subordinate officers.
In the hundreds? In the hundreds?
No, I couldn't estimate in that fashion. I could ask if you wish and get a specific number for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, we had a good question and answer period with the minister. Let me start with Royston Jones of the Eyewitness News. Royston, any further questions?
Yes. Let me just have a moment here. I had a question concerning. Can you come back to me on that?
Okay.
Sure.
Janelle, Eyewitness News. Wow, it's a good day for me. Jasper, Guardian News.
Yes, I have questions. While in opposition, Mr. Davis promised that a PLP government would hold publicly televised hearings into the affairs of BPL. When can we expect those hearings to start?
The Prime Minister remained deeply concerned about what was discovered in the recent BPL report. That matter now sits with the Office of the Attorney General, where both he and the Cabinet is seeking further guidance on what will be the next step. I think once that report is done, the Prime Minister will give clear indications of what he intends to do. As well, the Prime Minister returns to the country tomorrow, where he's expected to hold a press conference. So if my answer is not satisfactory, you could ask him again tomorrow.
So is he still committed to those televised public hearings?
You'll be able to ask him that tomorrow, but I could say that the matter is now before the AG's office, so I think it'll be, he won't be able to make a decision until he gets further guidance from the AG's office on those matters.
And the Deputy Prime Minister has expressed dismay with the Grand Lucayan deal on at least 2 occasions since coming to office. Does the Davis administration intend to move forward with the sale of the resort under the conditions and with the prospective buyers selected by the previous administration?
My understanding is that the Davis administration intends to pursue all available options to them and will make the decision in the best interest of the country. That's my understanding. Those conversations remain ongoing. Any further questions?
So still moving forward with the...
Well, like I say again, that they are going to assess all available options to them, and it's expected that they will make a decision in the best interest of the Bahamian people.
The PM was supposed to meet, I understand, with the Secretary of State for the U.S. Can you say if that meeting happened, what the outcome was?
The Prime Minister had some informal conversations with the President of the United States. It is on my understanding that the Prime Minister was invited to a meeting with the Secretary of State. He had a conflict in the schedule, but the Prime Minister is invited to participate in a series called Democracy Summit in December, where these conversations will continue. I think he did express that the Bahamas remain a partner in this global effort to combat climate change. Okay, Kyle Joaquin.
Yeah, first question. During the COP26 thing in London, the State Minister for the Environment, Basil McIntosh, did an absolutely horrible job at explaining the government's position on oil drilling. Can you state what is the Davis administration's position on oil drilling in the Bahamas?
Well, I think the Prime Minister during his communications throughout COP26 has expressed the government's position on oil drilling. The Prime Minister did say that the government of the Bahamas intend to pursue carbon credits as a point of interest for us. As you are aware, that was the center of our time being at COP26. We are looking into ways the Bahamas could monetize off its natural resources. The Prime Minister, again, is expected to be in the Bahamas. On the record, he has expressed already that the Bahamas' interests primarily in carbon credits and monetizing our natural resources as an option. There are further conversations with domestic and international experts on what direction the Bahamas ought to take. But what I can say as of now, the policy is looking at carbon credits, and I think the Prime Minister will speak further to this on his return to Nassau.
Any other questions?
Rashad?
Oh, yeah. There was some chatter in the FNM about the size of the delegation to Scotland. Do you want to address that? And can you also give us a sense of when we're going to find out more about the remaining board appointments?
Well, let me get to the board first. I think we can expect on the Prime Minister return some kind of finalization around the remaining board appointments. Insofar as the FNM's comments on the size of the Prime Minister's delegation, I think it's important to note one thing, that the former administration had no intentions of going to COP26. This is an administration that provided over the worst natural disasters in our country's history, Hurricane Dorian. We believe that the people of Dorian and the Bahamian people at large need an advocate in the room. Small minds think small. And I think that it is the position of us that we will advocate once we have the opportunity on behalf of the interests of the Bahamian people. The Prime Minister was presented with a much delegation in size. He reduced that delegation, and he took who he believed was necessary for that trip. And I believe that that small delegation achieved what was the outlying objectives. I couldn't tell you the last time I've heard Bahamian people say how proud they were of to be a Bahamian after listening to their prime minister on the global stage. We'll go back to Royston.
Thank you. So, has the government yet determined a timeline for the introduction of medicinal cannabis, or is it still going the direction of medicinal cannabis and using the recommendations of both commissions?
My understanding is the AG's office is seeking to have a position by the end of this calendar year. So that's where the AG's office is on the matter right now, that they will be able to advise Cabinet and by extension the Prime Minister by the end of the year on which measures or ways the government should pursue on the issue of cannabis.
Is this high up on the priority agenda, or much mention of it from government?
It was in the speech of the throne, as you could aware. The key priorities right now, Royston, is taking control of the pandemic and restoring the economy. We have highlighted it as a key component of our speech from the throne. So it's a critical, I think also, by extension, the Minister of Agriculture described it as a sexy item on the government's agenda, so it is a commitment of our administration.
Is there any conversation, discussion going on with the insurers, considering that come January there'll be a 10% addition?
Well, I think the Minister of Economic Affairs has put that issue to rest. The government has no intention on adding VAT onto the matter. What we will say to stakeholders to reach out to the government of August. The Davis administration has an open door policy of concerns. If there is legitimate concerns, we are there to listen to it. Providing value-added tax on home property and casualty insurance was never a decision of the Davis administration. So I think he said that in the minister said that in the Tribune business this morning. So it was never an intention of the Davis administration to move forward with a VAT on insurance.
What about the recent increases of insurance? Has that been discussed or of concern to the government as far as affordability is concerned?
Well, my understanding is that the government of the Bahamas do intend to meet with the relevant stakeholders ahead of any implementation. I think that, as you can appreciate, we did say that we will be an administration of consultation, and we will be guided by that. If there are legitimate concerns, and I'm sure that there are many industries that we will consult. We believe that consultation makes policy decision more effective and efficient in the best interest of all of the Bahamian people.
I'm going to piggyback on Rashad's question. The previous administration had pledged to disclose the travel costs of their cabinet ministers. They see that cabinet ministers of the Davis administration have gone on quite a few trips so far. Can you say whether the Davis administration will also make that promise to disclose to the public the cost of these trips?
I cannot say now. I will speak directly to the Prime Minister on that issue. I will say again that the Prime Minister do intend to have a press conference on his return. I don't have a position on that matter right now, but if he's not asked it tomorrow, I will follow up on that for you.
Now that the government has taken care of some early housekeeping matters in Parliament, like the budget, like thanking the Governor General for the speech from the throne, what may some of the earliest legislative agenda items be?
I think what has been said is that the government is focusing on two priorities right now, which is the Health Service Act, and the following one would be the amendments made in the Value Added Tax Act. I think those are the two critical policy legislative priorities that the government has right now, to my understanding, and that is what the Prime Minister has indicated to us for the remaining of the calendar year. I do, Royston?
When you finish.
But that's the priority right now, the Health Service Act, and as well as the amendments to the value-added tax amendments.
I was just going to ask, considering the former administration made that pledge to give an indication as to their travel expenses, would this government be so kind as to fulfill that obligation for them and provide the former administration's travel?
I think we are intended to be transparent stewards of the Bahamian people's resources and funding. The question that was asked to me is whether the Davis administration is committed to the policy. In absence of speaking to the Prime Minister, I cannot say that is the case. But what I can say is that we are committed to certain tenets of our democracy, and that is transparency. The Prime Minister will be available to answer that question specifically, and I want to give him the opportunity to do so tomorrow. Janelle? No, that's it. Okay, thanks guys, and Clint will be back next week. Good afternoon.